Greetings and welcome to our facilities management lesson. Today we're going to be covering our facilities management. So some of you, especially when you're sitting in R&O, you may be thinking, why is facilities management important to me? We have one person that's sitting in R&O, the facilities management project manager or program manager. They're the ones that are managing the program, and everybody else just is dealing with their own things, whether it's subamps, maybe it's floor plans, maybe it is amps or work management. And you might be thinking, well, facility manager is just this one small part of the program. I'm going to let this one person take care of it, and I'm just not going to deal with the program at all. That is not the best mindset to have. Facilities management is a vital program to the civil engineer enterprise. And hopefully during this lesson, we're going to go ahead and talk about why it is as important as it is. So for this lesson, we are going to understand how facility management is conducted in the Air Force. So we're going to define what is Air Force facilities management. How does that fall into the rest of the world when it comes to facilities management? We're going to understand the facility manager roles and responsibilities. So we're going to understand what the duties of a facility manager is, and we're going to know how they complete their duties. And this is important because if we are going to be interacting with our facility managers, if we're levying our facility managers to do work within the civil engineer community, then we need to at least know what their duties are. And lastly, we're going to explain the relationship between the civil engineer unit and the facility manager. We're going to see how they work with us to accomplish our goals in activity and asset management. So facilities management, when it comes to the Air Force, we are all about the Air Force, and we're all about trying to make sure that our bases are maintained and are vital to the Air Force mission, right? So even back before the Air Force was created, General Hap Arnold, the founder, the creator, the father of the Air Force, he put out there during World War II, air bases are a determining factor in the success of air operations. The two-legged stool of men and planes would topple over without this equally important third leg. So even back in World War II, when they're taken off from grass runways and dirt runways, they knew the importance of having a functioning air base, right? The Air Force is different than the Army, is different than the Navy. We don't push our forces forward. We don't, for the Navy, right, they bring their ships as close as they can to that mission, and they can, launch from there, whether it's aircraft or firepower from their Navy ships. The Army, obviously, the Army and the Marines, obviously, they go in and they hold the ground. But the Air Force, we fly from a decent part of a way, right? Because when our aircraft are on the ground, they are defenseless. They're really easy to pick off when they're on the ground. So we fly from far away. But because of that, we also are, the air bases, they're incredibly important to keep our airplanes and our aircraft and our mission up and running. Heck, if you're at a Space Force base, Vandenberg, Schriever, Peterson, right? You might not even have an air mission at your base, right? Vandenberg, they have a runway, but they don't have any aircraft assigned. Peterson, they have a runway, but it's the Air Reserve Wing that flies out of there. You could be at an AFMC base, which a lot of those don't have a lot of flying missions because they might be research or a depot. So it is incredibly important all across the Air Force to have a functioning Air Force base. So what is facilities management? So according to the International Facilities Management Association, that IFMA that we're talking about here, it's a profession that encompasses multiple disciplines, ensures functionality, comfort, safety, and efficiency of the built environment, and integrates people, places, processes, and technology. So it's a big, long way of saying basically they manage the facilities, which we already knew. IFMA, they've come out with this circle. It kind of shows all the different duties of a traditional facilities management. And we'll kind of go over these here in just a few more slides, and how these 6 points that they mention, how that incorporates into our Air Force facilities management. So we're going to go ahead and show a real quick video on facilities management.
A lot of people ask me, well, some people ask me, 2 people asked me once, what is facilities management again? Let me clarify this. Facilities management is a very specialized function that is evolving in corporate America, which takes care of the management of facilities for said corporations. Is that a lot clearer? Let me try it one more time. Facilities management has a very specific job description. It's just that nobody knows what it is. You see, an FMer, as I like to put it, has to be very familiar with management and facilities, as well as architecture, design, marketing, and also be an electrician, an engineer, a fortune teller, a gambler, and a magician. Besides that, the job is easy. The trick is coordination. The team, dealers, designers, and facility managers. It all starts with strategic planning. Once you've started, it's not only what you do, it's how you do it. Style. Once the project gets started, things get a little more complex. Some people think this can be done with one hand behind your back. Some people think a really talented FMer could keep this project going and even look away. Yes, they do. Keeping a watchful eye out for the unexpected. Just as I thought, the old unexpected again.
There's 3 of them that he's made.
You see, there comes a point in every facilities manager's life where it all has to be put together. You can't fake it. That's right. The left-hand return goes in the right office. The right-hand return goes in the left office. Very good. That goes there, around there. Check the 3rd floor. Not ready yet. Over there. Everything under control. A brilliant idea. Nah. The trick is coordination. Without it, it's a lot like juggling on a motorcycle. Is that getting any clearer? Well, now that everybody's moved in, things should slow down. Just kick back and oversee the facility. There may be a few minor details to work on, but as long as you're ready for anything, we out already? Did I say anything? I meant everything. Reconfiguring. Added security. Lighting. Plunging. Bribes. Forecasting. Red tape. Baby boomers. And then it starts all over again. Not that facilities management is a difficult job. It's just that you have to wear a lot of hats. It's knowing everything about everything, being everywhere, every minute of every day, every time. Whether the job is big or small, the trick's coordination. Besides that, the job is easy.
So facilities management in the Air Force, for most people, it is an additional duty. So most people get tagged onto that because they work in that facility, and it's the commander says, hey, we need somebody, and somebody either raises their hand or they get voluntold and saying, hey, you are going to be doing the facilities management for this building. We understand that, it's just like a lot of our other additional duties that are out there, security manager, UDM, our telephone communications officers, TCOs, it could be our equipment custodian accounts. All these are additional duties to basically help out our individual units that are out there. For some, especially when you're talking about your headquarters bases, these can be actual full-time jobs. There's actual GS series that are out there, GS 1640, 1601, 1176. These jobs are out there that that is their full-time job, is a facilities manager. We have 3E6s that get tasked as facility managers, and that is their full primary duty while they're at that assignment. So for most people, it is additional duty, but there is a good number of people that is their full-time job. The facilities management program is overseen at the base by your facilities management program manager, that FMPM that we talked about earlier, and they reside in your R&O. A lot of times these are going to be your 3E6s or your civilian 3E6 equivalents that are overseeing the program. Facility managers are going to be appointed by the unit commanders, and the reason why we have unit commanders doing that and not somebody below that is that the unit commander, they're the ones that are given custodial ownership of those facilities. Obviously, they don't own the facilities. The Air Force and the DoD own the facilities, but they are given custody of those facilities to make sure that those facilities are taken care of and the missions inside of those are complete. So it only makes sense that the unit commanders are the ones that are appointing them as additional duties, right? Even when you get into your equipment custodian accounts, your computer accounts and things along those lines, that's not done by your supervisor. It's not done by the flight chief. It's always done by the unit commander because they're the ones that can actually officially order those kind of things to happen. So always make sure that that's actually appointed by your unit commanders, and don't give much wiggle room on that. Facility manager, typically E5 and above or equivalent, and we'll talk about that in some future slides on why E5 and above is why that is the requirement that we have. And facility management is also governed by AFI 32-1001, Chapter 7. As we saw, right, facility managers, they have a lot of different hats that they're wearing, right? We looked at that circle, we saw the 6 different categories, and then there's a bunch of additional duties that are in those different categories. Unfortunately, because of that, facility managers are governed in many other AFIs, right? So we had the Department of the Air Force Manual 91-203, the safety manual. That is one place that has some facility management stuff. 32-2001 has some facility management stuff. The Emergency Management Program has some facility management stuff. Security Forces has some facility management stuff. There's facility management duties and responsibilities. They are kind of shotgunned out into a lot of different AFIs because facility managers, while CE owns and manages that program, they are kind of that focal point for pretty much anything that is in that facility. And civil engineering, while a good chunk, is not everything that happens in that facility. And did you know that we have, at least as of November of 2021, we have 59,701 facility managers in NextGen IT. That is more facility managers that are in NextGen IT than we have military civil engineers. So take that into account real quick when you think about that a lot of times our bases, we have more facility managers than we do civil engineers in that unit. So it is really important that we have a well-founded facility management program and facility managers are vital to how we do things in CE. And that number doesn't even include our Air National Guard or Air Force Reserve Command bases or our BOSS or BMC, our Base Operating Support or Base Maintenance Contract bases. They weren't in the system yet. They're still being worked into there. So just when you think about all that stuff, you can see just how big this program actually is. So we said we're going to go take a bigger look at that circle earlier, and here's that bigger circle, right? So we have a couple of different circles or different areas that the International Facilities Management Association said that we're going to have, that facility managers are going to be responsible for, right? So on the top right here, we have our technology. Facility managers, when they're dealing with technology, for us in the Air Force, is mostly dealing with next-gen IT or IMS. Even at bases that may still be using ACEs, they aren't really in ACEs. Those are the bases that still call in their things, but we do have the functionality in both next-gen and IMS for facility managers to submit requests directly to the system. We also have the health and safety section, right? That deals with facility security. It deals with safety, health, emergency management. All of those things fall under the health and safety area of our circle. Down here, training, right? Facility manager appointment. It's going to be important that our facility managers are appointed. And then we also have our initial training, which is done initially, right when they become facility managers. It's just normally a quick CDT that they take. Then we have formal training, which is normally something that we do in person. And then we have refresher training, which is done annually, and we'll talk about that here in the next few slides. Then over here, right, we have our project management and our energy conservation. We have our grounds maintenance and our CE services that they're also going to be a part of. And then we also have our facility managers taking part in service contracts. They're dealing with reserve parking. They're dealing with their real property and space management. So they are dealing with a lot of duties that are thrown on them, right? We're looking at this, right? Service contracts. Yes, it's part of CE in a lot of areas, but it's also something that contracting squadron deals with. So that's one unit that they're working with. Reserve parking is a security forces function. So they're dealing with that. Real property is CE. Grounds maintenance, CE services, project management, energy conservation, those are all CE. Then we get into emergency management, which again is CE, but it's a different area of CE. Health and safety, so those, now we got the medical group, we have safety involved, facility security, we have security forces involved again. So just when we're talking about units, that's already 5 units that we have that they're dealing with. So that's not even dealing with all the different functions that are within those units, which can be substantially more. So we talked about this earlier. To be a facility manager, you should be an E5 or above. So why do we have that requirement? So in our future slides, we're going to kind of show some numbers that kind of hopefully hammer this home. But when we're looking at this, our facility managers, they are working in our facilities. They're managing multi-million-dollar facilities in some cases. And not only are they managing these facilities, they're managing and dealing with the health, life, safety, security, all that stuff for all the people that work in that facility. So you look at it, your average facility, 50 people work in, and you look at that, and so one person is responsible for the health and safety of the 50 people that are within that facility, in addition to the actual cost of the plant replacement value of that facility. That's not something that is to be taken lightly, right? We don't normally have an A1C that is responsible for the health and safety of 50 different people, right? That's normally a supervisor's job to be dealing with the health and safety of people. It is normally a first sergeant's job to be dealing with the health, safety, and morale of people. That's not necessarily going to be something that we should throw on an A1C. Now, we do realize that that isn't always the case, right? If you are a guard or reservist that gets deployed downrange, sometimes you might be a A1C, but you might also be 36 years old and be a big supervisor in a Fortune 500 company in the outside world, and you're just doing your patriotic duty and you're in the Guard and Reserve and you get deployed. We understand that, but unfortunately, there's a lot of caveats. There's a lot of ifs, ands, buts, all that kind of stuff that we really can't go into, right? We try to make this as easy as possible. If we had all these different caveats, we'd be looking at this decision tree that looks crazy, and people would be like, why the heck is this so confusing? Why is this so complicated? So we just stick to the line of E5 or above to make it as simple as possible. We already talked about that they need to be appointed by unit commander and appropriate security clearances. In most facilities, this isn't a big deal. Most military members have secret clearances, and most facilities don't have top secret material in them, but some facilities do. We want to make sure that if you are a facility manager in those facilities, that you know what's going on in your facility, that you know what the missions are behind those doors. If you're being that facility manager and you're in charge of trying to make sure that we're having those communications, that we're talking with all of our different entities within that facility, you know what the future missions are in that facility, we want to make sure that you can actually advocate for things. So when they submit a work request saying that we need something because of a new mission coming in, and you go and that facility manager goes to the work request review board, or they submit that request online in NextGen IT, we want to make sure that they know the wording that they can put into there to justify why this work needs to be get done. Because what's going to happen is CE is going to look at that request, and if we're going to say, well, why do we need this new thing? Why do we need to switch from 220 down to 112 or whatever the case may be? Why does that matter? Why is that such a big deal? That facility manager needs to be able to say, well, this is why it's a big deal, because we have this new mission that's coming in. It's a top secret mission, but it is absolutely needed. It has, a high visibility from the Pentagon, whatever the case may be, and that helps try to justify and explain why we need something done, basically, right? They have to be physically capable. So some of our facility management duties revolve turning wrenches, climbing ladders. It might involve picking up heavy things. It could be going around picking up trash outside. So they have to be physically capable, or at least have the position to be able to delegate those acts. So obviously, not everybody can delegate. We understand that, supervision, chain of command, all that fun stuff. But they have to at least be able to talk to the first sergeant and say, hey, Shirt, it's been 30 days since we've done a walk around of our facility. I came in today and I'm seeing trash all over the place. We need to gather a crew out and go pick up the trash. So again, they need to either be physically capable of doing the work themselves or be able to delegate to those that are physically capable. If you are in NextGen, if you're at a base that has NextGen, they have to have a common access card. They have to be able to have access into NextGen IT. That is an AFI requirement. It's in AFI 32-1001 that facility managers will submit their requests in NextGen IT. We get some pushback on that. If you are an agency that's outside the Air Force, if you are Navy, Army, Marines that are a tenant unit on your Air Force base, a lot of them like to say, hey, I can't have access to the system, and there's no way that I can do this. I can tell you that they can get access. There's a whole process that we've vetted, we've worked through, we've made sure that everybody can have access to it. The instructions are on the AFCAC Business Process Library, which should be which was discussed in an earlier lesson. So it's, again, really important that facility managers can have access to that. We walked it through, and I want to say that, we took the lowest common denominator. We found a facility manager that didn't have a CAC, had very little IT background. Matter of fact, when this person, when we were going through there and getting them access into NextGen IT, we had a week back and forth trying to figure out why they couldn't access after we had done all the steps. Only found out that they never actually put their CAC in their computer, and that is why. So that is the level of people that we worked with, and we've gotten them access into NextGen IT, and they are submitting requests online to this day. So it is possible for every single person to be able to get into NextGen IT. So please make sure that happens. That's a time saver for you. And really, it's just a matter of your commander pushing that down. If you get pushback saying, hey, we can't do this, or we aren't going to do that, take a look at their support agreement. A lot of times, obviously every support agreement is written a little bit differently based off of the support agreement library that your base has. But there's normally a supplier and a receiver column that's in your support agreement. And in that support agreement, it's going to say something along the lines of the receiver or the supplier will, in this case, the supplier is the civil engineer or whatever your host wing is. It's going to say the supplier is going to provide civil engineer services for maintenance, repair, and construction on your base up to X number of dollars, whatever the case may be. But then on the receiver side, which is your tenant unit, a lot of times it's going to say that the supplier or the receiver must comply with the supplier's directives. Guess what? AFI 32-1001 is a directive, right? It's not a compliance with this publication is mandatory. That's what's in big bold letters at the top of that AFI. So that is a directive. It is saying you will do this. It is not It has a tier waiver requirement. So if they really want to push that to say that they don't want to have access into it, then they get to push that tier request waiver to say to get that appropriate approval, right? And it doesn't. It's not normally exceptionally easy, right? T3 is still your installation commander, so they have to explain to your installation commander why they don't want to have access into Next-Gen IT. And hopefully that discussion from your side, when your wing commander is asking, they can go through and say, hey, why this person says they don't want to have access, and you can go, well, they have access, they can have access, here's the steps to provide it, they just don't want to, and then your wing commander is most of the time going to side with, all right, get on board, dude, and take care of this. All right, jumping off that soapbox. All right, so also we want to make sure that they obviously submitted an appointment letter that's done by that unit commander. All right, so facility management roles. There's going to be some things, right? So we talked about when we looked at that big wheel that we are talking about recruitment and training. Facility managers also have to go through training. So initial training, usually done via My Learning Facility Management CVT. That's what we are recommending over at AFCAC, right? So we built this CVT, and so of course we're going to obviously recommend using it, but we built it so that it was a time saver for you. It goes through, it talks a lot about the things that are common at every base, right? We went and talked to the fire representatives at AFCAC. We talked to the emergency management representatives at AFCAC. We talked to all these people, made sure that what we were putting out there in this CVT was accurate for everybody in the Air Force, and we pushed it out there. We have a whole module on there about how to submit requests into Next-Gen IT and how to access Next-Gen IT. We have a section in that module that talks about how to run the Facility Management 003 report that shows all of the work orders and the current status of your work orders. So if you're getting phone calls about that, if they took that CVT since January of 2021, then they have that information on how to take care of that. Or you can refer them saying, hey, go ahead and take the CVT. The link is in that CVT, and go do your stuff, right? We do that again, so that's less that you have to do. When you do this formal training, hopefully you don't have to go into super far depths about a lot of the common tasks that facility managers have to do across the Air Force. You can just hit up on things that are specific to your base. So maybe common across the Air Force, right? They're responsible for key control at their installation, but maybe there's something specific at your base that you want to go into and say, hey, here's how you request keys. Maybe your lock shop is only open on certain days or certain hours. So instead of sitting here and spending a bunch of time talking about key control, you can just point out to your base-specific policies that are out there and get your facility managers trained up. Also, because it's a CVT, they can easily go back and reference it. If you're doing all your training formally without videos or anything, right? All they have are the slides to go back off of. And hopefully, when you're doing your presentation, you're not just reading off of the slides. And so, if you're doing that presentation, you're not reading off the slides. You're giving a lot of information. You're using the cues that are on the slides to say, hey, here's a topic. I'm going to go further into depth about that. And that's great. But the problem is that they don't have any reference to go back into to hear about what you had talked about. Formal training is usually done via face-to-face group training. That was obviously before COVID. Hopefully, as a pandemic starts loosening up, we can go back to that face-to-face group training. I know sometimes it's great because to have a Teams meeting or something along those lines. But as we go through these slides, we'll talk about that relationship that we have with facility managers, and it's really important that we have that relationship. And if we're just doing it all virtually, it's not quite that same level of interaction, and that relationship isn't quite as strong as if you're able to see them in person. Annual revalidation and refresher training. So some bases like to just refer their facility managers back to the formal training, say, hey, go back and retake a formal training. We don't recommend that. We recommend that that annual refresher training only covers policies that change, right? They've already been through training. Nobody wants to do that cyber awareness challenge every year. That hasn't changed much in the 17 years that I've been in. People don't look forward to that, right? They dread taking that CVT or the force protection CVT or any of those annual CVTs that we have to take each year. And how much, be honest with yourself, how much do you actually remember? How much do you actually learn after the first 2 times of taking that CVT? Not much, right? You're probably typically not learning much anymore. It's just going through and clicking that CBT. That's the same thing that's going to happen with our facility managers. If they're being forced to take this training again and again and again, they've already, if after the first or second time, they've already gotten all the information that they're going to get from that. So don't make them go through it all again just because. Just have a separate refresher training where they can go into there, talk about the policies that have changed over this last year, because policies do change. We get new chains of command in that push different policies and different directives. Things change in the Air Force, right? Next Gen IT is always changing. So just talk about those new policies that have come out and just make sure that facility manager information hasn't changed when it comes to revalidation. So for revalidation, we normally recommend that go happen along with the STAR process. And that's when they go through there, they look at their appointment letter, they see, hey, did my phone number change? Did my unit change? Are these still the facility manager's primary and alternate for our facilities? That's what we're looking for that annual revalidation. CE services, hopefully all of our facility managers know about the CE services. This is kind of the meat and potato that when you have a facility manager program, this is what everybody thinks that facility managers are taking care of, right? Inspections. We want our facility managers to go around our facilities once a month. We want them to look around in every room. Some bases say, hey, facility managers, we're not going to give you a mechanical room key. Obviously, that is base specific. I would recommend letting them have a mechanical room key. Obviously, I know we have to be careful with that so that people don't throw or start using those mechanical rooms as storage. But here's the caveat to that, and here's the reasoning why I recommend that they have a mechanical room key. There's been several cases, and if you go look through the Air Force news, you'll see that sometimes our facility managers have actually saved us a lot of money, a lot of damage, a lot of headache because they had access to those mechanical rooms. Maybe they heard an alarm going on in that room. So instead of having to run back to their office, make a phone call, CE going out there to take care of it, maybe we're talking an hour or two of time from the time that they notice it to when CE is going out there. And they were able to get into that mechanical room and find out, oh crap, this valve is broken and the mechanical room is flooding. They were able to see what the heck is going on in there, and they were able to get that taken care of a lot quicker that way than by just calling in saying, hey, there's an alarm going off in this room. Same thing can happen with our mechanical or for our HVAC units, right? Sometimes they've heard or seen or smelt some smoke. They've opened up the mechanical room and they've seen that the air conditioner is smoking, whether it's a belt or whatever the case may be. But they're able to click that power shutdown, the throw switch, and they're able to shut off the air conditioning unit and take care of things a lot quicker and prevent damage from happening by doing that, instead of having to wait for CE to get somebody to call into CE, Arno calling over to the shop either dispatching somebody that's in the office right now, or if everybody's out on a job, calling out to a job and saying, hey, drop your tools, head over to this building, then driving over there, finding the issue, and then coming over. So again, we're saving our time and potentially saving some issues. The only issue that we really have to be careful about is that mechanical room storage. So as long as we're keeping an eye on that, we get facility managers trained on that, and we're not giving mechanical room keys to everybody, and it's only for facility managers. Normally that is a low risk activity. So when they're going around doing their inspections, we want to make sure they're looking for fire, safety, and health issues. They're looking for unapproved work. Facility managers should know about everything that's going on in their facility, but let's be honest, even being a CE, we don't necessarily walk into every single room of our building every single day or every single month, right? When was the last time that you went over to your EOD shop? It may have been a few months, right? So we want to make sure that our facility managers are going in there and taking a look for any work that may have been done that may not have been approved, so that we can take care of the issues when it comes to that earlier and quicker. We also want them to be looking for damages, facility abuse, right? People get angry, punch a hole in the wall, moving furniture around, put a hole in the wall. Maybe facility abuse is something as simple as of doing work without being approved. There's a lot of different ways that facility abuse and damage can happen in a facility, and we want our facility managers to be able to go through there and find those damages. And lastly, we want to help them, or we want them to try to find some ways to be able to save energy within their facility. Obviously, energy costs are huge. They only are going up higher and higher every year. So the more energy that we can save and be conservative of our energy, then the more money in the Air Force that's available for everything else that we need to get done. CE service requests, right? So facility managers are going to be IDing issues, and then they're going to be submitting our work requests, right? So obviously, if you're a craftsman and you are going out and doing PM on an asset, and you see something wrong, hopefully you're submitting a corrective maintenance work task for that. But if you anything else along those lines that maybe weren't found during PM or weren't found during any kind of walkthroughs that CE has done, their facility manager should be able to submit those requests. And again, those are submitted to CE via NextGen, unless you have an emergency, in which case it's going to be by phone. And then we also have minor maintenance, that's going to be talking about the U-Fix-It. When we're talking about the U-Fix-It, we want to make sure that our facility managers are going through there and doing what we would expect a normal homeowner to be accomplished. If you own a house, we expect you to go and plunge a toilet, right? Even if you're renting a house, let's say that you're renting a house. Would you call your landlord if you clog your toilet? Probably not, unless it's a really big clog. At least you're going to try to do some remedies on your own, right? You're gonna sit there and you're gonna try to use a plunger on it. If you have some other minor issues, you're gonna go try to take care of it. If you were an actual homeowner, you're probably gonna try to take care of more things than you would even if you're renting a house. So if you're doing some of these smaller things as a facility manager, it really helps us, right? Because if it's a 5-minute job that our craftsmen, our technicians have to gather the tools for, drive over, take care of, and drive back, a 5-minute job just took 45 minutes to take care of. So facility managers, they're a good force multiplier for that. Grounds maintenance. Facility managers and the facility occupants, they are responsible to maintain 50 feet around their facility. So we have our grounds custodial contract. They're still going to be mowing the lawn and all that, but they aren't going to be necessarily picking up the trash. They're not going to be looking through the landscaping, making sure that it's weeded. They're not going to make sure that it's on the side, that the sidewalks, flower beds, etc., are controlled by weeds or controlled with weeds. Snow removal, it depends on the base. Some bases have their grounds service contractor take care of the snow removal all the way up to the facility, but a lot of facilities, a lot of bases do follow the service contract template, and that says that they won't be taking care, the contractors aren't normally going to take care of that snow removal around the facility. They're going to take care of the main sidewalks, the main roads, but they aren't necessarily going to be going straight up to the facility itself. So facility managers may be responsible for that. They're also responsible for taking care of the icicles, at least within reason, around their facility, around the walkways, the doorways of their facility. So obviously if it's a 20-foot overhang that's above them, then that's outside of their reach, outside of their capabilities. But if it's just a small overhang that's 10 feet above the door, then it is facility manager's job to knock those down, and that's actually in the safety manual. So that's not normally something that they can argue with. And while facility managers aren't necessarily responsible for the designated tobacco areas specifically, there's no AFI that specifically calls them out for that. That normally falls in that maintaining the 50 feet around the facility to make sure that your cigarette butts and other tobacco use items are taken care of in those designated tobacco areas. So fun note, it is not CE's responsibility to maintain those designated tobacco areas. That's in the tobacco-free living AFI that you can find. So if you get work requests saying, hey, CE, we want to do this for our smoking area or tobacco area, then you can deny them based off of that AFI. So take a look at that AFI if you are one of those bases that are getting those types of calls. All right, project management. So for the bases, the facility managers, the units that are doing contract by requester work, they're going to be coordinating between the user and the CE on contract language and inspection. So they're going to get that. So let's say that they want to do the carpet in their facility. They're going to submit the request to us, but before they submit that request, they're going to come up with the sample verbiage for their contract language. They're going to come up with the contracting document, and they're going to send that to us to go over. The reason why we want that stuff beforehand is so that we at least know what they're looking for, and we can make sure that that contract language is good to go. They might say, hey, I'm just going to be doing the carpet, but then if we don't actually see the contract language and we just say, yep, go ahead, take care of the carpet, We might find out that that contract language also includes the baseboards, includes wall paint touch-up, it includes ripping up some floor in some places, maybe patching, whatever the case may be, right? There's a lot of different things that they can add into those contracts as well. So we need to actually be able to see that contract language. They're also going to be participating in CE project planning. So we're looking at our larger scope projects, our facility projects, our capital projects, our opportunities. Facility managers are going to need to be involved with that. We need to make sure that their user needs are met. So that's why why we want to have the facility managers in those meetings. We want to make sure that what we are planning and designing is actually going to be functional for the user. And then we also want to make sure that the mission needs are met as well. Energy conservation. We already talked about this. Service contracts, they're going to be working hand and foot with our service contract office to make sure that walkthroughs are taken care of, walkthroughs are done in their facilities. We have, normally 3 people that work in our service contract section at a base, 1 assigned to each of the big 3. But each of those big 3 contracts normally have 4, 5, 6 different teams going around at a time to take care of things that are in those different facilities that they're responsible for. Our cores can't get around to every single one of those and take care of their administrative jobs that are out there as well. So our facility managers, they are going to be big eyes for us on that. So if they know that the service contractor comes every Monday at noon to go take out the trash and it is 1, 2 o'clock and the trash hasn't been taken out, they can kind of keep an eye on that and say, hey, it's now 4 o'clock. They haven't taken the trash out yet today. It's overflowing. They can call over to CE and say, hey, they normally come on Mondays and nobody has come today. Our trash is overflowing. And then our service contract section can look into that to see if there's a violation of the contract or whatever the case may be, right? Service contractors, they're companies, they're always trying to make the most money. And sometimes maybe they had a bunch of people calling sick that day and they couldn't able to get to all the things that they are required to do. But that core needs to know that so they can annotate that in their core stuff. Reserve parking. Facility managers are going to be looking at the reserve parking plan. So they're going to be managing that reserve parking plan for their facility. And if they want additional reserve parking, they're going to have to submit a request for it. There's more information on our BPL, but that is actually governed by an AFI. There's a Security Forces AFI that's actually in an Army regulation. So you go to the Security Forces AFI and it says, this AFI is actually this Army regulation. I think it's Army Regulation 90-05. And there's information in there about reserve parking. So make sure that it's in there. There's also in that regulation is a parking warden program. And if your security forces has that program up and running, they want to make sure that you are looking over those regulations so we can make sure we get that parking warden program up and running. But essentially that parking warden program allows for our facility managers to issue parking citations. Real property and space management. Facility managers are going to need to know who is in their facility and where they're at in that facility. And they need to know that if a unit just suddenly decides to randomly take over an empty office that's in that facility, then that's a no-go. They have to be able to go to that commander of that unit or that office and be like, hey, you can't just take over this office. That's not the way this works. We get that all the time, right? We get that mission sprawl. That if there is an empty building or empty workspace, people will find a way to use it, even if it is not in the best interest of the Air Force, right? If everybody had their own way, we would each have our own building out there to manage and have our own office in, and that's just not practical. So they'll request additional space when space is needed. If they have a new mission coming in, a bunch of people coming in, they're going to request additional space. They're going to request and coordinate unit moves as needed. Obviously, it depends on what's going on in that facility. They're also going to be dealing with the facility security, so they're going to make sure that there's a plan in place to make sure that facility is locked and secured at the end of the duty day, unless it's a 24/7 facility. And lastly, they're going to make sure that all the safety requirements. There's a lot of safety requirements in that DAFMAN. So not only there's a whole section that's in there just in regards to facilities management, but then there's a bunch of other ones that are in there for just common workspace cleanliness and general housekeeping that don't specifically apply to facility managers, but facility managers need to be keep an eye out when they're doing their walkthroughs. So making sure that your power cords aren't going over walkways, making sure that emergency exits aren't blocked, right? That's not specifically in the facility management section of the AFI, but it is something that they need to be keeping an eye out for. And then also training occupants on tool safety. So also in that DAFMAN, it says that if a tool is issued, then training must be given. So even if you have a flathead screwdriver, right? We're in CE, we like to think that flathead screwdrivers, everybody should know how to use one. But I'll be honest, even me, I use flathead screwdrivers for things that they aren't intended to be used for. In a pinch, I'll use them for a chisel, I use them as a pry bar, all sorts of things that they aren't meant to be used for. And sometimes that can result in injuries if they aren't using those tools properly. So make sure that your facility managers get trained if you loan out tools to them, and make sure that they are training their occupants if they loan out tools. Fire safety, they're going to be making sure it's fire safe. We've talked about some of those already. They're all in that DAFMAN requirement. We already talked about doing inspections. Health safety, you want to make sure the occupant health is coordinated. So we have a lot of health issues in our facilities, right? Between radon, between asbestos, between lead-based paint, between mold, all these things a lot of them fall under CE to an extent. So when facility managers, they need to know what hazards are in their facility, and they need to be able to communicate those hazards to their occupants and tell them what to do if they find something. They need to know that they can't just tear down walls and rip up floor tiles or rip up insulation on pipes. That could be very detrimental to their health. Emergency management, again, their duties are put out into their AFI, but they need to make sure that there's an emergency action plan in place. So all those evacuation route signs that you see on those safety bulletin boards that everybody ignores, they need to make sure those are out there. If there is, let's say that you have a critical mission in your facility, sometimes there's going to be times where those people are exempted from evacuating the facility. Sometimes we do have false alarms for our fire alarms, and when that happens, those people will stay in their workplace to take care of whatever mission critical thing is going on there. If a facility manager is responsible for one of those facilities, they need to know who is staying behind, what office they're in, so that when the fire department arrives, they can tell the emergency, the incident commander, they can tell them saying, hey, we have 5 people in room 102. They're in a mission critical stance right now. So just be aware of that and keep that room safe, I guess, more or less, right? They're going to make sure that checklists are in place for facilities emergencies. All right, so we just talked about all the facility manager duties. That's a big chunk of our lesson. Why do we think that might be a big chunk of our lesson? Well, it's because there's a lot of duties that facility managers are responsible for. It may be an additional duty, but it is a very large additional duty if they're doing it properly and they're doing it right. Again, that's why we don't want those low-ranking people that are still trying to figure out how to learn to do their job. We want the people that know their job and can focus on both their job and the additional duty that requires it. So facility managers, they are that central piece, point of contact for each of our facilities. They're going to work with nearly every CE entity, right? So R&O is in the operations flight, service contracts is in the operations flight, material controls in the operations flight, our CE shops are in the operations flight. But then you got engineering, you got real property, which is in the environmental or the installation management flight. We have environmental, which is in the installation management flight. We have fire prevention, which is in the fire flight, fire prevention flight, I apologize. And then emergency management, which is in the emergency management flight. So out of the 6 flights that are in a normal CE unit, facility managers are going to deal with at least 5 of those on a pretty regular basis. The exception might be the EUD flight, and even then, right, they might have to deal with an EUD during contingencies or during exercises. So they might be dealing with every single flight within CE. So they're that POC that we have, so that we're not sitting here going, hey, who do I need to contact in order to get this done? We can just go to this facility manager and say, hey, this is what we need done. And we can get it taken care of, right? And then they are also that conduit for us to talk to other facility units or other facility occupants, other units that are in that facility, and then also the command and leadership that's in that facility. So some keys to success for our civil engineers and our facility management program. We need to make sure that facility managers are trained. Now, as with anything else, right, we might not necessarily, facility managers might not necessarily get all the training. They might not comprehend all the training. They might not pay attention to all the training. We get that. It's just common nature. I know we have that CE butting heads thing when it comes to facility managers. But we have to realize that we also probably are guilty of the same thing, where we aren't necessarily always paying attention during the training that we are given. So we want to make sure that we at least are providing a quality training product. If 20% of the information is retained, then that's at least still 20% of the information that they have. Provide knowledge repositories. So sometimes facility managers just don't care, but a lot of times they do care. They just don't know what to do, right? So if we have these knowledge repositories, these SharePoint sites that are out there, they can go ahead and they can look at all these different items, all this different information at their leisure. So maybe you guys have a SharePoint site that says, hey, there's maybe a guide on there that says this is how you submit service requests in NextGen IT. And if they have any questions about how to do that, they can just go to the website, click on that link, and they can have the step-by-step instructions, right? You want to make sure that when you're doing these knowledge repositories that you have information on there that facility managers want, right? In this case, when we're talking about that service request job guide, it's going to be a lot easier to have that job guide out there where they can follow the step-by-steps with pictures than it is for you to try to explain it over the phone with them, right? So that's going to be, their facility managers are going to naturally want to use that more than they are going to want to have to be walked through over phone when you're just sitting in there saying, hey, over on the top right section, there should be a button that says blank. That's going to be a lot easier if they can just see it in a picture and then they're not trying to guess. So you're going to watch those repositories with SharePoint. You want to make sure you have a facility manager handbook that is required in AFI 32-1001, that every base have a facility manager handbook. There's a bunch of different options for those handbooks. You can look at our BPL for some of those options that are available. Facility management databases, you need to be able to track your facility managers, the appointment dates, the training dates, what facilities they're assigned to, and then also where they can find any kind of base-specific AFIs. Everybody should be on EPUBs, but we know that that isn't always the case, and that sometimes AFIs, base-specific AFIs get published to some sort of base website, and that's not always the easiest to find those AFIs. Get to know your facility managers. This is what we're talking about, building those relationships earlier, right? We want to make sure that we understand those facility managers. Hopefully you know them, you know their faces, you know their names. If you hang out with them, you can invite them to CE picnics, that kind of builds upon that whole, yes, you are part of the CE team. It's not an us versus them mentality. They are essentially core functions of the civil engineer unit, right? So we can invite them to those kind of things. We can understand their missions that are in their facilities. Maybe if you have some extra time, or maybe once a week, you coordinate with the facility manager and you host a tour of that facility for either your craftsmen, your technicians, or your R&O section. So you guys can all go over to that facility, get a tour of it, and understand what their missions are, what their issues are, what their challenges are, right? Every facility has different missions. They have different occupants. Everybody has different ways of dealing with things. And of course, different commanders, command chains, and all that fun stuff. All right. So we've talked a lot about the facility management roles and responsibilities. We've talked about how we build relationships with our facility managers. And this is what we get in return for all that stuff. So activity management, right? Facility managers typically fall under that facilities AMP. We have a couple here and there that might fall under the infrastructure or our utilities or electrical, just depending on what their mission is. Right, so LRS, for example, they might be a facility manager to a critical liquid fuel pumping station. So for the most part, though, they are all going to be underneath our facilities AMP. And what is our facilities activity level of service? And that's to provide usable facilities to achieve Air Force missions. That's the goal of our facilities AMP, right? That level of service that we are talking about here, that's met by proactively maintaining our facilities, by doing preventative maintenance, reactively resolving unexpected issues for corrective maintenance, constructing new facilities as mission needs dictate, predictive maintenance, and then demolishing facilities that can no longer meet Air Force needs. So out of all that stuff, facility managers play a huge role in both the predictive and the corrective maintenance areas, right? So they're the ones that normally call in all of those, or not call in, right? Submitting in Next Gen IT all of our corrective maintenance requirements. So big part of us being able to fulfill our usable facilities activity is having them tell us when things are wrong in their facility. If we were waiting for us to go out to those facilities to find things that are wrong, it may take months, depending on what kind of assets that are in there, right? We might be doing monthly PM on our HVAC unit, but that might be in through a mechanical room that goes to the outside of that facility. So they might not ever even go inside that facility for their annual PM. So if there's no problems that are happening in that facility that are being called in or being sent to us, we might not ever go into that facility. So how would we know when things are wrong without our facility managers? So here's some eye candy for you, right? So facility managers, we manage one of the Air Force costliest assets. So you can look down here, you can see the numbers that are out here, right? $586 billion of plant replacement value for all of our facilities based off of the builder information. We use builder information on that because when you pull this information, not everybody had switched over to Next Gen IT yet. So we want to make sure we captured our reserve bases and our boss BMC bases. So $586 billion seems like a lot of money, and it is, because when you look at the cost of all of our aircraft in the Air Force, it's $617 billion. That's not that far off from our facilities costs. So when we talk about that three-legged stool of our Air Force, facilities play a huge part of that, right? It's a huge cost, it's a huge amount of assets, and we can't do that without our facility managers helping us manage the maintenance and repairs of those facilities. When you look down here, the number of facilities that we have 228,000 facilities out there, and we have 5,537 aircraft. So by far, we dwarf the number of aircraft that are out there in the Air Force, right? So facility managers, they're an integral part of both activity management, which we talked about in the last slide, and asset management, right? We have a lot of facilities, and they're worth a lot of money. And those facility managers are integral to helping us maintain those. So when it comes to our maintenance, right, emergencies, normally facility managers are going to be IDing all of our emergencies, right? We're not going out there and normally identifying emergencies very often in our facilities. Preventive maintenance, contingency projects, those are all things that are going to be taken care of normally in-house through scheduled means. And then even our scheduled sustainment high corrective maintenance tasks, most of those should be being identified by our craftsmen when they're going out there and doing either PM or doing facility assessments on our assets. But then we go back down here, your 3Bs, your 3Cs, your 4As, and your 4Bs. Those are largely going to be FM ID'd requirements, right? So out of all these different work requests that we have coming in, 3 of them are going to be CE identified, but even with their 3As, some of these are going to be facility management or facility manager identified. But the vast majority of the requests that we come in are done by our facility managers. Our facility managers are going to see the assets more than CE does, right? We talked about that. It might be months before we go into a facility, but they're living with these facilities. They're living with these assets every day, right? They know when something doesn't sound right. If they're walking by this air conditioner, this mechanical room every single day, and one day they hear some loud clunking going on in that room, they're going to be able to say, hey, something doesn't sound right in this room, and they're going to be able to call in that service request to have us go out there and check it out. Maybe nothing, but ultimately, right, if they see these or they're walking by this facility, hundreds of times a year, and then out of one of those days, something just sounds really weird, it's better to be safe than sorry. They know the mission and the functionality of the facility, so when we're talking about our sub-amps and our amps, right, they're going to help us build those 5-year plans because they're going to ID what's going to be needed. When we're talking about here we go, right? So our sub amps, maybe they're planning installing a new air conditioner because that air conditioner is reaching the end of its service life. We can't, do our sweet spot replacement anymore. So we're planning on replacing that air conditioner with a like unit and being good, right? It's a 20-ton air conditioner. We're going to replace it with another 20-ton air conditioner. If we don't talk with that facility manager, we might not realize that there is a DoD mission that's coming down the pipeline that's going to be in that facility, maybe 3 years from now, and that's going to increase the BTUs that are in that facility. It might increase the amount of electricity. Maybe there's a new computer server rack that's going to be installed in that facility. And maybe we need to upgrade that 20-ton air conditioner to a 30-ton in our plans, right? We're going to be planning 5 years out, and that new mission is coming in 3 years, but they made, right? Sometimes missions we don't know for certain, and that service request might not be submitted until a year out or 2 years out, but we can plan for the right way now by talking to our facility managers. Again, facility managers, they're not our adversaries. They're a valuable member of our asset management team. So here's some ways that they can help us out. If you're a workforce manager, a 3E6 or a 3E6 civilian equivalent, right? We got maintenance analysis that we're going to be helping them out, right? We're going to be using the corrective maintenance that they submit to be able to do maintenance analysis, right? We can see, hey, builder might say this asset is green minus, but looking at the work data that's coming in, there's a lot of work requests that are coming in for this asset. Just because it may look pretty, when we actually dig down into it, it might actually be failing. And that's what that maintenance analysis is telling us. Facility unit relationship, right? We have that relationship between the units that are in our facilities, and we have that because of our facility managers. We provide the program guidance, and facility managers read that guidance and follow the guidance. We administer the program, and workforce managers manage that SR submission, right? Our sub-amps, our craftsmen that are out there, they're going to be doing facility unit relationship as well. They're going to be working on the project planning that we already talked about. They're going to know what's going on in that mission so we can plan better and make sure that we're hitting the right plans and doing the right things for that facility. They're going to help replace those assets before failure. We're going to help do that, and that's going to help them out. It's going to help determine the priorities as far as work. Maybe we have 20 different things that need to get done in the facility. When we talk to the facility manager, we can, obviously we want to incorporate sound asset management principles, but sometimes we might look at that and say, hey, we need to actually take care of this first because of blank, right? Something that maybe we weren't tracking or paying attention to. And then that maintenance analysis piece that we're talking about with that workforce managers. So we got one more slide left, and we'll hopefully be able to talk to this here. And hopefully this is a good summary of why the facility management program is important. We talked about it throughout this lesson, and hopefully this slide kind of brings it home, right? Your facility management program member or program managers, they're valuable members of the asset management process. They're going to ensure all of our facilities have facility managers, and by each facility having a facility manager, it's going to help eliminate blind spots. It's going to ensure that the mission and the unit member has a voice, right? Make sure that everybody can talk to the things that are happening in their facilities. We're going to make sure that our facility managers are trained. We're going to make sure that facility managers know about asset management. We're spreading this around. This asset management thing is not just a CE thing. It's not just an R&O thing. It's an everybody thing. And facility managers are part of that process. So we need to explain to them what that process is and how they fit into that. We're going to show them their importance. We're going to help and create and hold that standard, right? When we're talking about that rank requirement, right? So over here, we got the wonderful A-10, great, wonderful, beautiful aircraft, can do a lot of things, but look at the names that are on there for that dedicated crew chief. That's a tech sergeant name up on the top there. There's a reason that tech sergeant, that dedicated crew chief, when they sign off on that aircraft saying that it is maintained and it is ready to fly, they're guaranteeing the safety of that pilot, saying that we have done everything we can to make this airplane safe for you to fly so that it's not going to crash and you're not going to die. And that you can also accomplish the mission of that aircraft. That's the same thing that a facility manager does. Only instead of one person, or even in the case of a C-17 or an AC-130, multiple people that are in that airplane, maybe 20 people. You know, if we're talking about all the different people, especially in an AC-130, there's a lot of people that get into those, or the AWACS, or the RC-135s. We have a lot of people that are in those aircraft, but still, that number of people that are in those aircraft is still minuscule when looking at the number of people that are in our facilities. So if we require a tech sergeant or an NCO to be a dedicated crew chief to sign off on those maintenance records to say this plane is safe to fly, shouldn't we expect the same for our facility, saying that this facility is ready to complete its mission and it's safe to complete its mission? That's one of the reasons why we want to make sure that we have the right people with the right rank and responsibility. Again, just because you're a staff sergeant doesn't necessarily even mean that you're going to be great and responsible, but at least it means that you have proven yourself a little bit, and we can hold you to a higher standard than we hold to the A1C. We look at that enlisted force structure out there, and the responsibilities that we have for an A1C is typically learning your job, right? The NCOs, that's when we're talking about maintaining, making sure that your people are safe, making sure that assets are maintained, making sure that we are taking care of our resources, right? That's what our facility managers are charged to. We are following the enlisted force structure by saying that should be a staff sergeant or above taking care of that. And lastly, at the very end, want to make sure we foot stomp and caveat this. We have a lot of information on our business process library when it comes to facilities management, or really even any kind of topic out there. So make sure you're looking at that BPL. The link was in that one of the very first lessons for R&O information resources. Take a look at it. We build this stuff to help you guys out, and we give you a lot of tools to help you guys out so that you're not having to always reinvent the wheel. So with that said, this is the end of this lesson. Thank you very much for your time.